Did you know you were a genius? I discovered this about 4 or 5 years ago that there's a couple of different uh, thought processes. There's convergent groupthink, convergent thinking, and there's divergent thinking, which is thinking outside the group or thinking outside the box, like MacGyver Einstein. And they did a university research project that was longitudinal over a long period of time. And they gave a paperclip to 1,500 people. And they said, how many uses can you come up for paperclip, like fishhook and, all those kind of things like that. And they gave it to 1,500 kindergartners. 98%, here's a paperclip, 98% of the kindergartners tested at genius level, like MacGyver Einstein, because they would take a paperclip and turn it into a fishhook and a whole lot of different types of things using a paperclip. And they asked the same question 5 years later to the same kids, and 33% of all of the subjects were geniuses. They then waited until 10th grade and asked the same question of the same kids, and 13% were geniuses. They then waited until they were adults. They asked the same question of the same kids, or actually young adults, and 2% were still genius. My takeaway from it is sometime in your life, you were a genius. So, you're thinking, well, my gosh, what took that genius away? A lot. And I also thought the same thing as well. What took the genius away? And at first I blamed parents and teachers and the system. But as I started to pay attention to young people, I noticed something that they do something very, very interesting and sometimes irritating. They ask so many questions. Oh my God, they ask so many questions. Sometimes the questions are rather profound and deep. The meaning of life? You're 4 years old. How did you get that question? And their curiosity is driving their learning experience. They ask the same question. So they ask so many questions, and they're so curious, and they're like a sponge. And they get to middle school. If you sit in the front row, ask questions, your peers make fun of you. High school finishes a process. By the time you get to college, you're deaf, dumb, and mute, because you have to stuff your curiosity. So you've given up the ability to think outside the group because of peer pressure. I just found out about it an hour ago watching how cults, exercise influence on people. And one of the 7 steps, like the 3rd or 4th step, is the peers, that you're part of this group, and the peers, through influence, like they all choose the same thing, and you just have to go along with them. And that's a part of the cultivation of cults. And some of them end in very drastic suicide-type pacts, like the Hale-Bot and Jim Jones and a whole myriad of cults. And the interesting thing is that I was in 26 schools growing up, so I was always the new kid. So the new kid always got picked upon, and I learned in 1st and 2nd grade not to base my self-esteem upon my peers. So when they said, don't sit in the front row, ask questions, do you think I listened to them? So I was always a new kid. I would always sit in the front row wherever possible. My last name is Williams, so the teacher, when they gave assignments, would always put me in the very back of the room. And when I had the option, I was always sit in the front and leaned forward and asked the questions. And it's interesting because when you're in college and you ask questions every so often, when the professor would turn around and ask a question of the students, start a conversation, he'd ask a question, and the students would be like this, deer in the headlights, and they're really on the spot. But he would never turn around and look at me and ask me a question because I was already contributing, and he thought I was perhaps monopolizing, the lecture per se. So I was never really truly embarrassed. So, if you want to be a genius, and the divergent thinking is actually problem solvers, and that's why employers or looking for employees is people that solve problems. If you want to be a divergent thinker, like MacGyver Einstein, I would suggest that you sit in the front row at every conference, every educational opportunity, any place where learning is a part of the program, and lean forward and ask questions. Now, at first, the questions are rather out of practice because it hasn't been since kindergarten that you've been asking questions. So you're going to ask questions that are pretty lame. Okay, but you got to get past that. Eventually, you're going to ask questions that would make a kindergartner proud. You're going to listen to the lecture and then come up with some idea that the lecture, and you're going to ask a question, and the professor or the lecturer is going to go, "Oh my God, I never thought of that. That what I'm talking about, that was a very clever question." So whatever you do, please get that kindergartner possibility thinking. My slogan on my LinkedIn is "Saving the world by lunchtime." But it turned out to be a bigger task than I anticipated. That's kindergartner possibility thinking. I encourage you to reconnect to your kindergartner and be courageous and love curiosity because it's your best friend. Ask questions. Don't be afraid of not knowing everything, because when you stop asking questions, you stop growing emotionally and intelligently and wisdom-wise. Please subscribe to my channel. This is therapeutic for me, but I would like to grow and be connected to all of the people that believe what I says as matters. Please subscribe and share this little bit of information. I am slightly enchanted, but over these couple of lectures that I've been doing, I'm actually getting a little bit more. I'm going to have to drink a whole bottle of vodka in order to get drunk in the future. I might even actually be able to be in competition with the Russians. And I'm from Alaska. Alaskans drink more per capita than any other state, but I neglected my alcohol birthright until I'm right now 61. Although I tell people I'm 98, looking for a hot 90-year-old that might be open to having a child. So don't tell anybody that I'm 60, okay? Just tell them I'm 98. Thank you very much for listening to The Homeless Educator, and I will hold you my thoughts. Thank you.